B here, and welcome to another card breakdown. Today we'll be looking at Countermagic. Countermagic is a Sapphire PvP quick action with a 3 cost and 2 Sapphire threshold. It was a joyous day for most Control players when this baseline interrupt was revealed. However, not everyone was thrilled, and more than one person grumbled about a few aspects of this card. Its cost is a bit uncomfortable, like Atrophy, and a 3 resource interrupt isn't what most people wanted to pay, but given all the other reveals, it does fit HEX. It also provides a monstrously large design space into which HEX can move in future sets. To begin, an interrupt sends a target spell to the graveyard without allowing it to resolve, and it works because of a game mechanic called the chain. Now, this is a very simplified explanation. Whenever you play a card, imagine that you're putting it on your table. When you want the played card to resolve, you have to pass priority to your opponent, who can then play a quick action in response. If they do, they put it on top of your card. Then, if they want their card to resolve, they pass priority back to you. This goes back and forth until you're both done adding cards. On your table, you now have a stack of cards. You then resolve each card from top to bottom, or last in, first out, as it's normally referred to in TCGs. So, to use Countermagic as a simple example, let's say your opponent plays His Majesty King Gabriel. Your opponent passes priority, and you play Countermagic, and target good old Gabby. You both decline to play more cards, and your Countermagic resolves first, since it's on top. Gabby then mopes his way to the graveyard, since the card was interrupted. Now, this is a very simple example, and there are levels of complexity to learn with this mechanic, especially when different types of abilities and effects get involved. The best way to improve your understanding of complex mechanics like this would be to participate in things like the weekly HEX puzzles found on HEX Shuffle. The link is in the description below, and even if you aren't certain your solution is correct, you should give it a try, and then use the answers to help grow your skill and understanding. Exhaustive tangents aside, the best part about Countermagic is that it affords 2 separate, though sometimes intertwined, strategic applications. Usually you look to interrupt a spell when you don't want to see it on the field at a given time. While this might sound ridiculously simple, there are definitely times you might allow a power card, like Jadem, to resolve because you already have an answer, like Murder, in your hand. With Countermagic, there's a second application. If the interrupt is successful, each opponent's copy of the interrupted card gets a permanent +2 resource cost. This is the aspect that fits HEX perfectly, and can lead to some very interesting situations, especially in multiplayer, as this effect hits all your opponent's copies. To describe each application, let's say your foe casts a card like Pack Raptor, which previously had a Replicator's Gambit played on it. This would be a perfect case where you definitely don't want to see the troop come into play. But adding 2 to the cost of a Pack Raptor isn't really prohibitive, and you'd likely see Pack Raptors still played later in the match. Conversely, if early in a match, your opponent plays a card with escalation, like Eternal Youth or Ragefire, the initial effect would be very easy to live with. But the strategic benefit of increasing the cost of all other copies by 2, as well as the fact that the escalation itself won't trigger because the card doesn't resolve, makes this a perfect example of a situation where your opponent may never play another copy of those cards in a match due to Countermagic's secondary effect. Taking into account both components when deciding to interrupt a spell will be important in HEX, and it makes Countermagic a great baseline control option in both Constructed and Draft. As this is only the first interrupt revealed, and a common card in the first set at that, expect far more specialized options to be available in the future. Looking at PvE, the Helm is okay, but it will likely have a relatively small window for optimal use, as you must still satisfy the threshold requirement, making it not available in the first couple of turns. And late game, holding 3 resources open shouldn't be too difficult. It could be nice to save yourself the cost, but if you pull a late game shard, you definitely have to weigh the 2 saved resources against the lost charge and permanent resource. The boots are going to be a long shot, as the chances that 1. You'll face a deck with an interrupt, and 2. Have a spell that must be countered when your opponent has an interrupt in hand are low. As such, it would be better to equip boots that provide a more consistent benefit. Unless you're playing in a heavy control meta Wild West PvP format, where equipment and PvE cards are allowed. But expecting that format to make sense at this point is like expecting the Will Smith Wild Wild West movie to make sense. Ugh, terrible movie. Thank you for watching. If you agree or disagree, I'd love to read your comments below, or on the Utopian Chaos forums. If you liked the video, please take the time to subscribe, and leave a comment on which card you would like in my next breakdown. Hope to see you in HEX for some good games and good times.